Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome back to day 6 of my 12 days of OT Christmas series. Today I thought I would share with you some of my favorite books that pertain to occupational therapy, some directly and some indirectly, probably most of them actually indirectly, but we'll go through all or most of the categories. So I've got a fiction, I've got a nonfiction, I've got some textbooks, and then I've got a more client-centered book, one that I have recommended to some of my families to work on fine motor skills. The first book that I'm going to recommend is called An Anthropologist on Mars by Oliver Sacks. Oliver Sacks is a neurologist and an author. He's written multiple books. He focuses on neurological anomalies that happen after strokes or other neurological events. So in this book, there's 7 short stories of individuals who experienced, again, some atypical neurological event that caused them to experience and see the world in a very different way. There's a story about a man with amnesia. There is a story about another surgeon who actually has Tourette syndrome, and he's able to perform surgeries, and when he is performing his surgeries, he has absolutely no tics. So that's a really incredible read. There's a story about his encounter with an autistic savant, is how he calls him, who I believe lives in England. It's been a long time since I read this book. And then I think there's also a story in here about his interaction with Temple Grandin. So I feel like a lot of OTs are familiar with Temple Grandin and her work related to the community for individuals with autism. I think this is a really interesting read if you work with adult patients, if you work in neuro. This just dives in into the personal story of each of those individuals and how they interact with the world and overcome these neurological differences. And I really like this book. I really like reading books and stories like this because this is how we learn, right? Someone unfortunately has an injury or an illness or a life-changing event, but we're able to learn more about the human body, about the nervous system. And I think this book just shows how incredible the nervous system actually is, how our body is able to process so much information, and then what can happen if one little thing gets tweaked, either for good or for bad. There's also a story about a man in here regaining his sight after he loses or after he suffers from childhood blindness, and how he never developed a way of processing the world visually. So again, if you work with adults, if you work with neuro, or you're just interested in some really unique stories about some interesting humans, I would definitely check this out. Anthropologist on Mars by Oliver Sacks. Okay, this next one I believe is classified as fiction, although I could be wrong. This one is called A Spirit Catches You When You Fall Down. This one is by Anne Fademan. Could be butchering that, and I apologize, Anne. I don't know how I found out about this book, but this is a story about refugees from Laos. It is a Hmong family. They immigrated. I believe this takes place in the 70s or 80s. Again, it's been a while since I read this. But this family immigrates to America from Laos, and it really documents the cultural differences and this one family's interaction with the American medical system. And I think it does a really good job of showing both perspectives. It shows the doctors and nurses and the healthcare system view of, they're doing everything that they can to try and help this child who actually suffered. I don't want to give too much away, but there's a child that's got some medical issues, and the healthcare system is doing everything that they can to help this family, and they're frustrated because due to the family's cultural differences, they're not doing all the recommendations, or they don't understand. It documents the family side of the mistrust for this healthcare system, and I think this book, if you're working, really if you're working with anyone, it brings more cultural awareness, cultural competence, and just really being aware that not everyone shares your same views, your same beliefs, and that's completely fine. But you have to respect those differences and be aware of them in order to provide the best care. So I think as occupational therapists, we're fairly good at that and being respectful of people's cultures and learning how to incorporate that into their therapy. I think that is one of the favorite parts of my job, is learning about new cultures and new aspects of this world that I was never aware of. I have encountered so many unique individuals because of this job. But I think this book really captures that. I think it does get a bit political, if I recall, about the war in Laos, which I know nothing about. So if you can look past that, or if you don't care about that, I do think this is a really, really great read, because again, it just captures, I'm looking at more from the healthcare perspective, from the doctor's perspective of them trying to give a recommendation for medicine or a therapeutic recommendation. The family doesn't follow through and they're just like, why are they not doing it? So highly, highly recommend. Again, a spirit catches you and you fall down. This next one, I'm not sure why I'm recommending this. This next one is a large textbook, but I think of all the textbooks that I had while I was in OT school, for some reason, this one was one of my favorites. I don't know if it's because my fieldwork was in acute care and I referenced it frequently, but I think this book would honestly benefit anyone. I think having a good foundation in medicine and in anatomy and physiology and knowing different medical diagnoses is so important, because we are a point person. We are a point of contact with the family. We see our patients and our clients more frequently, many times, or more often than their doctors. So sometimes we pick up on things medically, or we may be the first ones to notice something wrong. We may be the first to notice that there's a more underlying medical condition that's causing the deficits that we're treating. We may notice sleep apnea, we may notice seizures, we may notice visual problems. So knowing how to recognize those, I think, is really important. So I'm not going to really go into detail with this book, but I will say I like it because it is organized, it's easy to read, it's organized by system, it has amazing tables and graphics. Everything's just very clear. Here's an example of the heart. Like, to me, I can look at that and understand what they're trying to say. It's not complex. I'm not a doctor, right? I don't need to have the knowledge level of a doctor, but I do need to have the basic understanding of the cardiac system and the nervous system, and and how everything works together. If you are a new grad, I think this is an amazing book. I like it because they have amazing tables. So, you could take a picture of this and turn it into a PDF and save it on your phone. You could, take a picture and print it out and laminate it and keep it. Any of these things in here. So, I think particularly if you're working in acute care, a SNF, inpatient rehab, and you don't I mean, don't go out and spend a lot of money, but if you have this book in school, I think it is a real benefit. The last book is a book that is for practitioners and for clients and their families. So this is a book that I have recommended. It is a Fine Motor Skills for Children with Down Syndrome. I do have a lot of kids on my caseload that have the diagnosis of Down syndrome, and I think this book is easy enough for most parents. You have to know your families and know who you can give a textbook to, but I really like this book. It does not only apply to children with Down syndrome. The fine motor things that they are talking about in here and all the activities can be applied to to a broad spectrum of diagnoses, or you can adapt or grade it however you need to. So I think as a new grad, this book may be helpful. And it goes through the lifespan, or at least through high school age, I believe. So it talks about fine motor development and life skills all the way, I believe probably through early adulthood. So it is a very functional book. It's not just fine motor for fine motor. It's not just Tong activities, right? It's how can my child be functional in everyday life with using their hands the way that they need to. So I think if you are in early development, outpatient peds, or if you work in a school setting, I think this book would definitely be on my list of recommendations. Oh, and we've got one more bonus book just for fun. And the bonus book has absolutely nothing to do with occupational therapy, because obviously I have a life outside of occupational therapy, and some of my preferences and hobbies and interests have nothing to do with OT. Shocking. So if you would like a recommendation for a book to read in 2021, I highly recommend Ender's Game. This is one of my favorite books. I absolutely love Orson Scott Card. This is one of my husband's favorite books, I believe. They tried to make a movie out of this book with Harrison Ford. It was probably one of the worst book to movie, probably one of the worst renditions from book to movie that I've ever seen. So please do not watch the movie, or if you have, I'm so sorry. But again, if you just want to read some fiction and take your mind off of things, I highly, highly recommend Ender's Game. I don't know when it was written, honest. When was Ender's Game written? Nobody knows. But that's your bonus recommendation. Hopefully that was beneficial to y'all. If you have favorite books related to OT, or just books in general that you want to share with us, leave them in the comments. I'm always looking for new books. Last year, my goal was to read a book every month, and I think I pretty much failed after the first. I think I read 5 books, so that's not bad. 5 months, that's pretty good. 5 books a year, that's not too bad. So yeah, leave your recommendations in the comments if you have any. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.